Hey, and welcome back to the channel. What are we talking about this week? We're talking about getting jobs overseas because I get so many inquiries. That's the topic coming right up. Okay, so the topic for this week is how do you get a job from overseas or get a job overseas? Why do I want to talk about this? Well, one of the most popular videos on this channel is how to get a job in supply chain. Now, if you haven't seen it, we'll put a link below. And basically there, I gave some tips on, basic job hunting in the supply chain industry. One of the most commonly asked questions that I get either on the channel, on LinkedIn or on my blogs is things like, oh, I'm studying in Canada and I want to get a job in Australia in supply chain, or I'm in Africa, or I'm in India, I'm in Pakistan, I'm in Malaysia, I had one today, how can I get a job in Australia? And I kind of feel awkward going back to people because it's not that easy. And what I thought I'd do this week is kind of explain from my perspective here in Australia some of the barriers, and maybe I can share a few tips. Now, obviously, there's a caveat. This is just my experience from living in Australia and dealing with overseas applicants for jobs. I don't know what it's like in the US or Canada or the UK. I imagine some of the hurdles are going to be similar. But if you are trying to basically emigrate to another country for work, in supply chain or whatever other field, please check out what the rules are for that particular country. And I would almost advise seeking professional advice on all the sort of visa elements and work permits and things like that. But just from my perspective, I'll share with you what some of the barriers are, because I don't think some people appreciate how difficult it is. Okay, so I'm based in Australia. I run a management consulting company along with a couple of other businesses, and I'm always on the lookout for good people, to be honest. If good people crop up, I'll certainly give them an interview. And it's funny, whenever I look at people who've joined Logistics Bureau, which is my main consulting business, did we go out on a recruiting drive? Did we hire recruiters? Generally not. It's usually that we just came across somebody and we talked to them, we interviewed them, and we thought, wow, this person's really great, we'll find a place for them. So that's a lesson, isn't it? Right at the beginning. And it was a lesson I was taught decades ago when I was job hunting, and that is not all jobs are advertised, and not many jobs, I forget the percentage, are actually filled through an advertising process. Networking and just being in the right place at the right time is the most important. So those people that I've hired in recent years were networking pretty well, and they were reaching out to me. I wasn't necessarily looking at that time. Okay, so let's take a hypothetical. Maybe you're in India or Canada or wherever. Generally, people who ask me this question are studying, and they're saying, hey, I love supply chain. I'd love to be able to come to Australia and work in supply chain. I'd love to come and work in your business in supply chain. Alternatively, maybe you're asking people in America or UK or wherever. The principle, I think, is going to be similar. The challenge that you have, Australian perspective, is that there are dozens of people who want to join my business. There are dozens of people who want to get into supply chain. I was talking to a lovely guy the other day who is an Australian. He's been working in the security industry. He studied some logistics stuff at college, and now he wants to get into supply chain. He just can't get his foot in the door. I suggested, maybe start with warehouse work, and he's been doing that, and a bit of casual warehouse work. But, he just can't get his foot in the door, even though he's got some qualification and some experience. So it's a challenge. Your first challenge, trying to seek work from an overseas country, is that there are a lot of people in your target country already chasing those jobs. Very well qualified people, very well experienced people. So you've somehow got to jump ahead of them, and that's not easy. So when people apply to me, the first question is, do you have a work permit? No. For me to go through the process of hiring someone from overseas, and I've done it once in 23 years, let me explain the process, and I might be a little bit out of date, but it doesn't matter about the specifics. I'm really just explaining conceptually the hurdles that people have to go through. I'm the employer. In fact, this was probably 25 years ago. And I wanted to hire someone from the UK to come here and work in Australia. I won't go into the ins and outs of why they were referred to me by someone that whose opinion I valued, and I thought, yep, they're going to be pretty good. I had to sponsor that person to come to Australia. I basically had to prove to the government that I couldn't hire someone with those skills here in Australia, and that is really hard to do. It was at the time a consulting role that was very specific and required some very specific software skills. I had to advertise locally for that position, and then I had to show the government, look, I've advertised and I can't get qualified people. And it was it took weeks and weeks, months. And then finally they said, okay, we'll approve that visa application for that person to come from overseas. That's what you've got to compete against. Would I do that now? Probably not. I'm just being honest with you. Probably not. Why not? It was a very long, time-consuming and expensive process. And like I said, a couple of times, I've got lots of applicants here locally. So that doesn't help you being an overseas applicant. So how can you get around all of that? So I've advised a couple of people recently, and I've said, maybe try to get a job with a big multinational in your country, do well there for a couple of years, and then maybe there's an opportunity to transfer elsewhere. That could work, but you could face the same sort of problems. Where I think people have most success is moving to another country to study. And I hope I'm not breaking any sort of immigration laws or whatever by suggesting this. But what happens here in Australia, a lot of overseas students will come here and they'll study all kinds of stuff, including supply chain and logistics. At the time of speaking, a student visa allows you to work part-time. Again, check the details because I could be out of date, but I think at the moment a student's allowed to work 20 hours a week part-time. And I have done this with a couple of people where they came to work for me part-time while they were studying. There's one guy with us at the moment from India who started out like that. And excuse me. And then what can happen is at the end of your study, I believe there is a process of saying, can you please extend my right to work? And it might be for a couple of years if I can find an employer for a full-time job. And I've done that a couple of times. Both times with students from India who were really smart, very well suited to working with us. They had done great work with their degrees. One person has since gone on now to join another company here in Australia and is doing really well. Another one decided to return to India. But that seems to be the process that works best. So I don't know if that would work for, America, Canada, UK, whatever, but it seems to be an acceptable way by governments to have people coming in from overseas. They're contributing to the economy, they're studying, they're obviously paying their tuition fees. They're probably allowed to work part-time, so you're able to network and get some income and start to understand the local industry. You can get a little bit of experience while you're studying. And then it's about making connections and trying to secure yourself a job. Maybe you can get, what do they call it? The sort of outplacement things where students, go and work with a company during their breaks. It'll come to me, the term. Maybe you can do some of that sort of work experience stuff, make the contacts. And then if you click with that company, if you do really good work, they like you, they're going to help you then by taking you on. And it's a lot easier for those companies to sponsor somebody who's already here, on a student visa, and they'll say, yep, we'll give them a job for 2 years. That is so much easier than trying to bring someone in from overseas. So I'm not sure if that helps, but I kind of just wanted to be upfront because so many people contact me and say, I'd love to come and work with you, I'd love to come to Australia. It's just not that easy. I wish it was, but I thought I'd better just explain to you what the process is and why it's so difficult. It's not that the employer doesn't want to give you a chance. It's because of all the immigration laws and things that make it so difficult. And, when you've got people from overseas, it's a bit of a challenge. How do I interview them? How do I know what they're like? And I've got 10 people lining up outside the door here who I can talk to. So it's much better if you can get yourself to that country by some means. And I'm suggesting studying is a good way. There may be others. If you know of any others, do please comment below and, share the tips here. But if you come over to study, then it's a lot easier. And lots of people come from overseas to study here in Australia. And then they start working legally with their student visa, and then they'll get, temporary work visas and so on. And there's a process to go through, and it takes years. And eventually they end up, staying here permanently, which is great. But it's just a long process. So the only thing I would add to all of that is that in any job hunting, whether it's in your own country or whether you've come to study here and you're looking around while you're here, networking is the way to actually secure jobs. I was taught that 30 years ago when I left my job in the UK. I was given an outplacement and taught how to look for jobs. I'd only ever had one job, and they gave me an outplacement service which taught me about how to look for jobs. And they kept saying it's about networking. Most of the jobs don't get advertised, so please just take that on board. Networking is so important. Very easy to do online these days. The best business network online is LinkedIn. Jump on there, connect with people, connect with me. Don't just send me a connection request. Here's a tip. Don't just, here's John Smith from Johannesburg, because I go, who's John Smith? If you're watching this and you want to connect with me, send me a connection request on LinkedIn and say, hey, Rob, saw your YouTube video about, whatever it was, getting jobs overseas, love to connect. And then I know it was you who was watching this, because, a lot of people on LinkedIn don't want to accept every single request because you're kind of not sure who some of the people are. They might be, trying to sell me something, or they're just recruiters who want to get access to my network. So, there's a little bit of tip for the networking. Always send a personal message. LinkedIn has that ability where you can either just click connect and this, bland connection request comes through, or there's a little option which says send a message, and do that. Hi, Rob. Love your YouTube video, love to connect. We're connected, bang, straight away, not a problem. So connect with people online, connect with people face-to-face as much as possible. So, get out into industry groups, mingle, even if you're not one of these people who likes those sort of things, learn to like it. It's really important when you're trying to look for work and become better known in your industry. So whatever industry associations are going, things like that, get out and meet other people in the industry. And don't be shy, don't push yourself, but don't be shy and say, hey, I'm looking for a job in this sort of area, or, hey, if you're networking in Mumbai and you're hoping to get a work job in Sydney, you never know who you might meet. And say, oh yeah, I'm getting into supply chain and I'd love to get over to Sydney and get a supply chain job there. Maybe some of the people you're talking to there have connections in Sydney. Maybe they're in a business that has operations in Sydney. So don't be put off with networking. It's amazing the people that you'll meet and the connections that they have. So that's really important. So there we go. Sorry, I rambled on a bit. So let's just summarize that. Trying to get a job in an overseas country from your own country can be quite difficult. I've tried to explain the other way from the employer's perspective. It's very difficult having someone apply from overseas. It's a very lengthy, time-consuming and expensive process. And it's a real gamble because I haven't met this person, whereas there could be 10 people lining up at the door here. And very often the best way is to move into that country first as a student, get to know the environment, the culture, do a little bit of part-time work, some networking, and that's very often the best way. So if you feel like sending an email saying, Rob, I'm, in whatever country, I get lots from Nigeria and Kenya, I'd love to come to Sydney and work for you. I'd love for you to do that, but it's just not possible. I'm sorry. So I hope this video has helped. I didn't want to dishearten anyone, but I think it's better to just put the cards on the table and say, hey, look, this is the facts of life, and maybe help you out with some tips that can help you actually get that overseas job that you want. Okay, so I hope that was of some value. If you were not subscribed to this channel, before you go, do subscribe. Hit that red subscribe button, hit the bell. That way you'll get notified every time we have a new video coming out, and they generally come out on a Wednesday every week. And of course, as always, if there are particular topics that you'd like to hear about, comment down below, and I'd love to hear your suggestions, because I've been doing these channels for a long time, and it's not always easy to think of topics that people might want to hear about. So tell me, and I'll talk about the topics that you want to hear about. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.